In the early days of World War II, German commanders were supremely confident. Their Panzer divisions had crushed Poland in just 27 days, conquered France in a mere 6 weeks, and seemed utterly unstoppable as they rampaged across Europe. Wehrmacht generals gazed upon their sophisticated Tiger tanks, their precision-engineered machinery, and firmly believed they possessed the finest military equipment the world had ever seen. These behemoths of steel, with their thick armor and devastating firepower, symbolized the pinnacle of German engineering prowess. Then, in 1941, intelligence reports began trickling into German headquarters about a peculiar American vehicle. The photographs depicted what appeared to be a crude, boxy contraption, barely more than a motorized cart with 4 wheels, lacking any significant armor or heavy armament. German officers gathered around these images in their command posts, chuckling derisively. They dubbed it Das Amerikanische Spielzeugauto, the American toy car. They dismissed it as a laughable invention from a nation they viewed as industrially capable but militarily naive. Little did they know, this toy would soon become a nightmare on wheels, reshaping the battlefield in ways they could scarcely comprehend. They would not be laughing for long. Good evening, I'm your host. And tonight we're diving deep into the extraordinary story of how a simple quarter-ton truck evolved into one of the most feared and respected vehicles in military history. This is the tale of American ingenuity, the power of mass production, and a revolutionary approach to battlefield mobility that left German commanders stunned, scrambling to adapt and ultimately contributing to their downfall. To truly grasp the shock that rippled through the ranks of the Wehrmacht, we must first immerse ourselves in their mindset. Back in 1941, the German military machine had perfected the art of blitzkrieg lightning warfare, a doctrine that emphasized speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. Their strategy hinged on massive, heavily armored tanks like the Panzer IV and, later, the formidable Tiger I, supported by half-tracks such as the SDKFZ 251 and intricate logistics networks. German engineering philosophy was rooted in complexity, precision, and raw, devastating firepower. A single Tiger tank, for instance, weighed around 57 tons, boasted armor up to 4 inches thick in critical areas, and was armed with an 88mm KWK-36 gun that could punch through Allied armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards. Producing one such tank cost as much as 5 American Sherman tanks and demanded highly trained crews, specialized mechanics, and extensive maintenance routines. But when it functioned flawlessly, it was a terror on the battlefield, capable of decimating enemy formations with ease. Into this world of heavy metal thunder and mechanical sophistication came whispers of something the Americans were calling a Jeep. At first, the reports were met with skepticism and amusement. How could such a diminutive vehicle pose any threat to the mighty Panzers? German intelligence analysts pored over blurry reconnaissance photos, shaking their heads at what seemed like a makeshift scout car. Yet, as more details emerged, a subtle unease began to set in. The Jeep wasn't designed to slug it out in direct confrontations like the Tiger. It was built for something far more insidious, ubiquitous mobility that allowed American forces to outflank, outmaneuver, and outthink their opponents. This contrast in design philosophies would prove to be a harbinger of the war's shifting tides. The story of the Jeep begins not on the blood-soaked fields of Europe or the scorching sands of North Africa, but in a modest factory in Butler, Pennsylvania, and with the visionary determination of a man named Karl Probst. In June 1940, as German panzers thundered through France, toppling the Third Republic and sending shockwaves through the Allied world, the U.S. Army issued an almost impossible challenge to American manufacturers. They sought a light reconnaissance vehicle that could carry 3 men, mount a .30 caliber machine gun, feature 4-wheel drive for cross-country traversal, and weigh no more than 1,300 pounds, all while being rugged enough to handle the rigors of combat. And here's the kicker. They demanded the first prototype be delivered in just 49 days. This timeline was audacious, bordering on the absurd, given the complexities of automotive design and prototyping. Most major manufacturers, including giants like General Motors and Chrysler, reviewed the specifications and politely declined, citing the impracticality of the deadline and the stringent weight requirements. But not Karl Probst at the American Bantam Car Company. Bantam was a small outfit, struggling financially but brimming with innovative spirit. Probst, an experienced automotive engineer who had previously worked on designs for Mack Trucks and other firms, took up the gauntlet. He worked around the clock, often sleeping on his drawing board amid stacks of blueprints and coffee-stained notes. Drawing inspiration from existing light vehicles and incorporating feedback from Army officers, Probst sketched out a design that emphasized simplicity, durability, and versatility. His team at Bantam assembled the first prototype, dubbed the Bantam Reconnaissance Car, BRC, in a frantic 49-day sprint, delivering it to the Army's testing grounds at Camp Holabird, Maryland. On September 23, 1940, the vehicle weighed in at 1,840 pounds over the limit, but impressively close, and demonstrated remarkable off-road capabilities during trials. Meanwhile, two other companies, Willys Overland Motors of Toledo, Ohio, and Ford Motor Company, were also drawn into the competition. Willys, facing bankruptcy, saw the contract as a lifeline and submitted their quad prototype, powered by a robust 60-horsepower Go Devil engine. Ford entered with the Pygmy, a compact design that incorporated many of Bantam's ideas, but with Ford's manufacturing efficiencies. The Army tested all three rigorously, subjecting them to grueling off-road courses, steep inclines, mud pits, and river fords. What emerged from this intense rivalry was a standardized design that blended the best elements of each: Bantam's lightweight frame, Willys' powerful engine, and Ford's production scalability. The final vehicle, officially designated the Willys MB and its Ford counterpart, the GPW, was deceptively simple yet profoundly effective. Let's delve into the technical specifications that made the Jeep a game-changer. Measuring just 11 feet long, 5 feet 2 inches wide, and 4 feet high when the windshield was folded down, the Jeep tipped the scales at around 2,200 pounds empty. Its wheelbase was a compact 80 inches, allowing for tight turns and nimble handling. The heart of the beast was the Willys L134 Go Devil inline 4-cylinder engine, displacing 134 cubic inches and producing 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM with 105 pounds-ft of torque. This may sound modest by today's standards, but in 1941, it provided a top speed of 55 miles per hour on roads, an exceptional low-end torque for off-road crawling. The four-wheel drive system, engaged via a transfer case, featured high and low ranges, enabling the Jeep to tackle gradients up to 60 degrees and ford water up to 18 inches, deep without modifications. Fuel efficiency was another boon. When fully loaded, it could squeeze 20 miles out of a single gallon of gasoline. Thanks to its 15-gallon tank and efficient gearing, the Jeep's frame was a sturdy, ladder-type chassis with leaf spring suspension on both axles, providing 8.5 inches of ground clearance. It could carry up to 5 soldiers or 800 pounds of cargo, and its modular design allowed for easy mounting of weapons like the Browning M1919, machine gun, or even anti-tank rockets and field modifications. Tires were 6.00x 16 non-directional treads, designed for mud, sand, and snow. Compared to the German Tiger tank, the differences were stark. The Tiger I, for example, measured 20.7 feet long, 12.3 feet wide, and 9.8 feet high, weighing a colossal 57 tons. Its Maybach HL23 OP45 V12 engine produced 700 horsepower, but fuel consumption was voracious, around 2 miles per gallon on roads and less off-road. The Tiger's 88mm gun had a muzzle velocity of 2,690 feet per second, far outclassing anything the Jeep carried. But it required a crew of 5 and constant maintenance due to its complex interleaved road wheels, which often froze in mud or snow. What truly made German commanders nervous once they grasped the Jeep's implications was its role in enabling a new paradigm of warfare. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander in Europe, would later reflect in his memoirs, Crusade in Europe, that the Jeep was one of the 4 tools that won World War II alongside the bulldozer for clearing obstacles, the 2.5-ton truck for heavy logistics, and the C-47 Skytrain transport plane for airborne operations. Eisenhower emphasized, the Jeep, the Dakota airplane, the landing craft, these were the 3 tools that won the war. Think about that for a moment. Not the mighty M4 Sherman tank with its 75mm gun. Not the P-51 Mustang fighter plane dominating the skies. Not the Iowa-class battleships pounding coastal defenses. A simple, unarmored, lightweight truck that cost about $650 to produce less than the price of a single Tiger's transmission repair. Eisenhower's praise wasn't mere hyperbole. It stemmed from personal experience. As a young officer in the interwar years, he had participated in the 1919 Transcontinental Motor Convoy, a grueling cross-country trek that highlighted the need for versatile military vehicles. During World War II, Eisenhower often rode in Jeeps to inspect front lines, appreciating their ability to navigate bombed-out roads and muddy fields. Similarly, General George S. Patton, Jr., the hard-charging commander of the U.S. Third Army, was a fervent Jeep advocate. Patton modified his personal Jeep with sirens, extra lights, and a .50 caliber machine gun mount, using it to race across battlefields at breakneck speeds. In one famous incident during the Battle of the Bulge, Patton's Jeep allowed him to personally direct traffic at a congested crossroads, ensuring his divisions could counterattack swiftly. Patton once quipped, "My men can eat their belts, but my tanks gotta have gas." But he might as well have added that his Jeeps needed to keep moving to outpace the enemy. November 1942 marked a pivotal turning point. Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. This massive amphibious assault involved over 100,000 troops landing in Morocco and Algeria to squeeze the Axis forces between the advancing British 8th Army from the east and the new Anglo-American forces from the west. German Afrika Korps commanders, led by the legendary Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, were veterans of lightning victories across the vast, unforgiving deserts. They had mastered mobile warfare in open terrain, using their Panzer III and IV tanks to outflank British positions at battles like Gazala and Tobruk. Rommel's forces were accustomed to the harsh conditions, scorching heat by day, freezing cold at night, and endless sand that clogged engines and eroded tracks. Picture this scene vividly. You're a German Panzer commander, seasoned by months of desert warfare under Rommel's command. Your Tiger tank, that 57-ton monster with its impenetrable frontal armor and fearsome 88mm gun, represents the apex of military engineering. You've just positioned your unit in what you believe is an impregnable defensive line, rocky wadis and steep escarpments that no conventional vehicle could navigate without getting bogged down or tipping over. Your scouts report all quiet, and you settle in for a routine watch. Then, seemingly materializing out of the shimmering heat haze, American reconnaissance teams in these strange little vehicles begin appearing in places that defy logic. They're darting up seemingly impassable slopes, scouting your positions with binoculars and radios, calling in precise artillery strikes from distant howitzers, and vanishing into the dunes before your heavy tanks can even traverse their turrets or lumber into position. The shock was palpable. Rommel himself, in his personal diary entries later compiled in the Rommel Papers, noted the disturbing mobility of American reconnaissance units. He wrote of how these light cars allowed the Allies to infiltrate his lines, gather intelligence, and disrupt supply routes with impunity. Declassified German intelligence reports from this period reveal a growing concern about what they termed Die Amerikanische Infiltration Stack, American infiltration tactics. These documents, now housed in archives like the Bundesarchiv in Freiburg, describe how jeeps enabled small teams to bypass strongpoints, lay ambushes, and coordinate air support. One particularly telling account comes from the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943, the first major clash between U.S. and German forces in the theater. At Kasserine Pass, Rommel launched a bold counteroffensive against inexperienced American troops of the Second Corps under Lieutenant General Lloyd Fredendall. The Germans, with their 10th and 21st Panzer divisions, smashed through the pass, inflicting heavy casualties and capturing thousands of prisoners. Yet, even in victory, German officers were baffled by the jeep's performance. A captured German officer, interrogated after the battle by Allied intelligence, reportedly exclaimed in broken English, "Your little cars, they go everywhere. Our tanks, they are powerful, but they cannot follow where you go." This quote, documented in U.S. Army historical records, underscores the frustration. During the fighting, American jeeps equipped with 37mm anti-tank guns, though inadequate against Tigers, were used for hit-and-run tactics, evacuating wounded under fire, and ferrying ammunition through narrow mountain paths. The terrain at Kasserine was a mix of rugged mountains, narrow valleys, and soft sand, ideal for defensive warfare, but a nightmare for heavy armor. Tigers and Panthers struggled with mechanical breakdowns. Their wide tracks sank in loose soil, and their fuel-guzzling engines demanded constant resupply. Jeeps, with their low ground pressure of about 1 pound per square inch, less than a human foot, floated over the same ground. Soldiers like Sergeant Alvin York, no relation to the W.I. hero but a real GI from the 1st Armored Division, recalled in oral histories, "We'd drive those jeeps right up the side of a hill that looked like a wall. The Krauts would fire at us, but we'd be gone before they could adjust. Saved my skin more times than I can count." Another veteran, Private First Class John Bassellone, a Medal of Honor recipient from Guadalcanal, who later fought in Europe, praised the Jeep for its reliability in his letters home. "This thing's a mule on wheels, hauls everything. Breaks nothing." Here's why this mobility was so shocking to German commanders. A Tiger tank, for all its power and intimidation, was severely limited by its sheer mass and dimensions. It couldn't cross weak bridges without engineers reinforcing them, couldn't navigate narrow mountain paths without risking a rollover, and was utterly ineffective in swampy or heavily forested terrain where its size became a liability. The Jeep, weighing less than 2 tons and with a turning radius of just 17.5 feet, could go almost anywhere a soldier could walk, and faster. In the deserts of Tunisia, jeeps towed anti-tank guns into flanking positions, allowing American artillery to target German columns from unexpected angles. Rommel's after-action reports lamented how these vehicles turned the tide in reconnaissance, enabling the Allies to predict and counter his maneuvers. But it wasn't just about raw mobility. It was about fundamentally altering tactics. German military doctrine, honed through the teachings of generals like Heinz Guderian in his book Achtung Panzer, was built around concentrated, overwhelming Vorschwerpunkt, or focal point attacks where massed armor broke through enemy lines. The Jeep embodied something entirely different: distributed, flexible, adaptive warfare that emphasized initiative at the small unit level. General Patton understood this intuitively. He often traveled in his customized Jeep, dubbed Old Blood and Guts Chariot by his troops, reasoning that he could cover more ground, observe more of the battlefield firsthand, and react faster than if confined to a lumbering command vehicle like a half-track. Patton's diary entries reveal his admiration. The Jeep is the most American thing ever invented, fast, tough, and unforgiving. During the Sicilian campaign in 1943, Patton used Jeeps to personally scout routes, bypassing staff recommendations and pushing his forces forward at a blistering pace. As the war unfolded, German commanders found themselves facing this tactical puzzle on multiple fronts. By 1943, the Jeep was deployed in every theater of World War II, from the frozen steppes of Russia via Lend-Lease to the Soviets, to the steaming jungles of the Pacific. And German forces encountered the same shocking mobility wherever they turned. In Sicily, during Operation Husky in July 1943, German mountain troops of the Hermann Göring Division reported American units materializing on ridgelines and in valleys that their intelligence had deemed impassable to motor vehicles. The island's rocky, mountainous terrain, crisscrossed with ancient goat paths and terraced vineyards, should have favored static defenses. But Jeeps ferried supplies, evacuated the wounded, and maintained vital communications lines where even mules faltered. A German lieutenant captured near Monte Cassino in Italy later confided in Allied interrogators, "We would set up our defenses thinking the terrain would protect our flanks. Then these American Jeeps would appear behind us, as if they had simply driven up the mountain face itself." This account, preserved in the U.S. National Archives, highlights how Jeeps enabled envelopment tactics, turning what should have been prolonged sieges into swift advances. The Italian campaign provided even more dramatic examples. In the brutal fighting around Anzio and the Gustav Line, Jeeps navigated shell-cratered roads and mud-choked trails to deliver hot meals, ammunition, and medical supplies. One soldier, Corporal Audie Murphy, the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II, recounted in his memoir, To Hell and Back, how a Jeep saved his platoon during a German counterattack. "We piled into that Jeep and tore out of there like bats out of hell, machine gun bullets whizzing past. Without it, we'd have been goners." Murphy's Jeep allowed his unit to reposition quickly, calling in naval gunfire that halted the enemy advance. Perhaps nowhere was the Jeep's impact more profound than in the Pacific theater, where the environment posed unique challenges. In the dense jungles of Burma, the Philippines, and New Guinea, American and Allied forces used Jeeps to traverse terrain that Japanese commanders believed was utterly impassable to any wheeled vehicle. The Imperial Japanese Army relied on foot marches and pack animals, assuming the thick undergrowth, monsoon rains, and muddy tracks would neutralize mechanized advantages. But the Jeep's four-wheel drive system, combined with its low ground pressure, proved them wrong. At just over 1 pound per square inch, a Jeep exerted less pressure on soft ground than a walking soldier in boots, allowing it to plow through mud, cross shallow streams, and climb slippery slopes without bogging down. In the Burma campaign, part of the China-Burma-India theater, Jeeps supported Merrill's Marauders, a special operations unit that conducted long-range penetration missions behind Japanese lines. Loaded with rations, radios, and mortar, these Jeeps enabled the Marauders to strike supply depots and airfields, disrupting Japanese logistics. One veteran, Sergeant Vincent Malilo, shared in a post-war interview, "The Jeep was our legs in that hellish jungle. We'd chain them together to pull through swamps, and they'd just keep going. The Japs couldn't believe it. They thought we were ghosts." Similarly, in the Philippines during the Leyte landings in 1944, Jeeps raced inland from beaches, establishing forward observation posts that directed devastating naval bombardments back in North Africa and Europe. The British Long Range Desert Group, LRDG, and Special Air Service SAS, adopted American Jeeps for their daring deep penetration raids behind German lines. Founded by Major David Sterling, the SAS modified Jeeps with Vickers machine guns, extra fuel cans, and sun compasses, turning them into mobile raiders. These units would load up with water, ammunition, and explosives, then vanish into the Sahara for weeks, hitting airfields, convoys, and fuel dumps. SES legend Patty Main destroyed over 100 Axis aircraft in such raids. German commanders, including Rommel, became so alarmed by these phantom patrols that they diverted Panzer units and aircraft to hunt them down. But how do you stop something as elusive as a Jeep in the vast desert? Rommel confided to his aides, as recorded in captured documents, "These British ghosts in their American cars are bleeding us dry. We must find a way to counter them." What truly stunned German military leaders, when they finally comprehended the full scope, was the sheer scale of American production. By the war's end in 1945, over 653,568 Jeeps had rolled off assembly lines, primarily from Willys in Toledo and Ford plants across the U.S. To put this in stark perspective, Germany produced approximately 67,000 half-track vehicles, like the SDKFZ 7 and 251, during the entire 6 years of war. America churned out more Jeeps in a single year than Germany managed half-tracks in the whole conflict. Captured German intelligence documents, such as those from the OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, reveal escalating alarm about American industrial might. A report dated March 1944 estimated that U.S. forces had unlimited numbers of these light vehicles, warning that the enemy's logistical superiority renders our defensive strategies untenable. This wasn't merely about quantity. It was about operational flexibility and resilience. While German units had to meticulously conserve their vehicles, maintain convoluted supply chains for bespoke spare parts, and curtail operations based on mechanical reliability, American units embraced a use-it-up, wear-it-out ethos. Confident that replacements were plentiful, captured German officers frequently highlighted the psychological toll in interrogations. One Panzer commander, Oberst Hans von Luck of the 21st Panzer Division, later wrote in his memoir, "Panzer Commander, you could destroy 10 of their Jeeps, and 20 more would appear the next day." It was demoralizing. Our men began to question if we could ever stem the tide. Von Luck's unit encountered Jeeps during the Normandy campaign, where they facilitated rapid Allied advances after D-Day. As the war progressed into 1944, German commanders grappled with a dilemma they hadn't anticipated. How do you combat an enemy that can materialize anywhere, at any time, with no forewarning? Declassified Wehrmacht documents from 1943 and 1944 show a fascinating evolution in their thinking. Early references to American Jeeps are dismissive, laced with contempt terms like primitive and unworthy abound. But by mid-1944, German tactical manuals, such as the Handbuch für den Kampfwagenkommandant, devoted entire sections to countering light mobile reconnaissance forces. Units began extending perimeter defenses by miles, posting additional sentries on high ground, and forming rapid reaction teams equipped with motorcycles and light infantry to chase down infiltrating Jeeps. These adaptations, however, exacted a heavy price. They diverted troops, fuel, and resources from frontline combat, weakening overall positions. Perhaps the ultimate testament to the Jeep's prowess was the German effort to capture them intact. U.S. Army historian Hugh Cole, who interviewed Wehrmacht generals post-war, reported that they admired the Jeep more than anything else in the formidable American arsenal. Captured Jeeps were prize trophies, often repainted in Wehrmacht colors and used for command or scout duties. During the Ardennes Offensive, Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944, Otto Skorzny's commandos in operation Grief disguised themselves as Americans and used captured jeeps to sow confusion behind Allied lines. The Germans even attempted to replicate the jeep's success. The Volkswagen Type 82 Kübelwagen, designed by Ferdinand Porsche, was their pre-war equivalent, a rear-wheel drive utility vehicle produced in about 50,000 units. But it lacked four-wheel drive and struggled off-road. Later, the Type 166 Schwimmwagen added amphibious capability. With around 15,000 built, but German engineering's focus on precision over simplicity couldn't match the Jeep's rugged reliability. The Schwimmwagen's complex propeller system often failed in combat, whereas the Jeep's SEAP variant, Ford GPA, was simpler, though less produced. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, the tenacious commander of German forces in Italy, reportedly told his staff in late 1943, "The Americans have created something we did not anticipate, a vehicle that makes every piece of terrain accessible to modern warfare." Kesselring, overseeing the defense of the Italian peninsula, witnessed Jeeps enabling Allied breakthroughs at Salerno and Anzio. German commanders gradually realized the Jeep signified more than enhanced mobility. It heralded a revolution in military logistics. While German supply lines depended on heavy trucks like the Opel Blitz that required paved roads and bridges, American forces could sustain operations almost anywhere. In the Apennine Mountains of Italy, positions that should have been isolated by rugged terrain faced constant harassment because Jeeps hauled supplies via goat trails and riverbeds deemed impossible by German planners. By 1944, astute German commanders like General Heinrich von Wiedinghoff recognized they were witnessing something epical, not merely the erosion of their armies, but the obsolescence of their warfighting doctrine. One German general, captured after Berlin's fall in May 1945, told his interrogators, "You Americans changed the rules of war. We prepared to fight tanks with tanks, planes with planes. We did not prepare to fight an enemy that could be everywhere at once." This sentiment echoes in post-war analyses by the German General Staff, who attributed much of their defeat to Allied logistical superiority. What stunned German commanders wasn't solely where American Jeeps could venture, but the myriad roles they fulfilled upon arrival. This wasn't merely a reconnaissance vehicle. It was a versatile tactical system that adapted to any need. In medical evacuation, Jeeps served as frontline ambulances in terrain where traditional wheeled ambulances bogged down. Equipped with litters and plasma racks, they ferried wounded soldiers from foxholes to field hospitals, saving countless lives. During the Normandy hedgerows, where bocage country restricted movement, Jeeps navigated narrow lanes to reach casualties quickly. One medic, Staff Sergeant Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector and Medal of Honor recipient, used Jeeps to transport the injured during fierce fighting on Okinawa. Though his primary theater was Pacific Dot as artillery observation platforms, Jeeps transformed fire support. Forward observers perched in Jeeps could ascend hills for superior vantage points, radioing coordinates to batteries miles away, then relocate swiftly under enemy counter-battery fire. In the Hurtgen Forest battles of late 1944, Jeeps enabled precise barrages that blunted German counterattacks. German reports noted with dismay how American artillery seemed omniscient. Thanks to these mobile spotters, Jeeps laid thousands of miles of telephone wire, maintained radio networks, and functioned as mobile command posts for battalion commanders. Their ability to carry Signal Corps equipment ensured communications remained intact even after bombardment severed lines. German intelligence marveled at how swiftly American units re-established contact, often within hours. But perhaps most unsettling were the Special Operations applications. The Office of Strategic Services (OSS), precursor to the CIA, deployed Jeeps for deep penetration missions behind enemy lines. In occupied France, OSS teams like Jedburgh used Jeeps to link up with Maquis resistance fighters, delivering weapons and coordinating sabotage. These operations rendered German rear areas perilous. No supply depot or headquarters was safe. The Jeep's modular design facilitated rapid reconfiguration. A single vehicle might transport personnel in the morning, haul ammunition in the afternoon, and mount a .50 caliber Browning as a gun truck at night. German vehicles, rigidly designed for specific roles like the Kübelwagen for light transport or the SDKFZ 250 for armored scouting, lacked this adaptability. American creativity extended to delivery methods. Jeeps were parachuted from C-47S during airborne operations like Market Garden, glider-borne in Sicily, and modified for amphibious assaults. The SEAP Ford GPA particularly alarmed German coastal defenders, as it could emerge from landing craft, ford beaches, and push inland. Circumventing fortifications, a psychological dimension emerged that German commanders acutely recognized. The sight of American Jeeps in impossible locales demoralized troops, eroding confidence in defensive preparations. If the enemy could drive anywhere, what security did trenches or minefields provide? Morale reports from Wehrmacht units in 1944 cite Jeep phobia as a factor in desertions and lowered fighting spirit. The ultimate gauge of the Jeep's influence lies in post-war German military studies. Officers like General Gerd von Rundstedt, in debriefings, consistently cited American logistical dominance, with the Jeep prominent, while German commanders wrestled with Jeeps on the battlefield. A greater shock brewed in American factories, a production revolution that dwarfed anything in the Reich. At the Willys Overland plant in Toledo, Ohio, and Ford's sprawling facilities in Dearborn and elsewhere, a manufacturing miracle unfolded. By 1943, assembly lines completed a new Jeep every 80 seconds, around the clock. 7 days a week, fueled by shifts of dedicated workers, many of them women stepping into roles vacated by drafted men. This Rosie the Riveter workforce welded frames, installed engines, and tested vehicles with patriotic fervor. German industrial planners, upon grasping this scale through intelligence estimates, were astounded. Their most efficient tank factory, like the Mann plant producing Panzer IVs, managed perhaps 300 units monthly at peak. American Jeep output surpassed 1,000 per day. This disparity stemmed from philosophical differences. German engineering prized perfection, each component machined to tolerances of thousandths of an inch, resulting in exquisite but finicky machines. American engineering favored good enough, reliable, field-repairable designs using standardized parts. Henry Ford's assembly line techniques, refined in civilian auto production, were adapted for war. Jeeps were built in modular sections, with interchangeable components from multiple suppliers. This allowed for rapid scaling. By 1944, over 18,000 Jeeps were produced monthly. Field maintenance exemplified this ethos. A German half-track like the SDKFZ 251 required specialized mechanics and rare parts. Breakdowns could sideline units for days. A Jeep could be fixed by any soldier with basic tools, wrenches, pliers, and perhaps a hammer. Common issues like flat tires or clogged carburetors were resolved in minutes. German commanders decried what seemed like American profligacy. U.S. units abandoned damaged Jeeps that Germans would laboriously repair. But this wasn't waste. It was strategic advantage. Why invest hours fixing one when factories supplied dozens daily? The Jeep epitomized a warfare paradigm where material abundance supplanted tactical genius. German officers, schooled in Clausewitzian maneuver, pondered, how do you outmaneuver an adversary with boundless mobility? Production figures grew more staggering with Lend-Lease. American factories equipped not only U.S. forces but British, Soviet, Free French, and other allies. Over 50,000 Jeeps went to the Red Army, where Marshal Georgy Zhukov praised them for enduring the Eastern Front's mud and snow. By 1944, German troops faced American-built Jeeps on all fronts from Normandy beaches to Ukrainian plains. A post-war German study concluded, American industrial capacity rendered traditional military planning obsolete. When the enemy replaces losses faster than you inflict them, conventional strategy becomes meaningless. From our vantage today, it's evident those German commanders, stunned by Jeep mobility, witnessed modern warfare's birth. When hostilities ceased in May 1945, 653,568 Jeeps had been manufactured. They served on every continent, in climates from Arctic tundras to equatorial jungles, in roles designers never envisioned, from towing gliders to mounting rocket launchers. But their paramount contribution was conceptual, proving mobility and adaptability could prevail over armor and firepower. This reshaped military doctrine for decades. The Jeep's influence permeated the Cold War and beyond. Light, multi-purpose vehicles became doctrinal staples. The U.S. M151 Mutt succeeded the World War II Jeep, serving in Vietnam, while the Humvee, HMMWV, evolved from it. Deploying in Desert Storm, even adversaries adopted the concept. Soviet GAZ-69 and Chinese Beijing BJ212 mirrored Jeep designs. In irony, post-war German forces Bundeswehr in the West, National People's Army in the East employed Jeep. Descendants like the DKW Munga and IFAP-3. The civilian legacy endures most profoundly. Returning G is regaled families with Jeep tailies, sparking demand. Willys transition to civilian models like the CJ2A in 1945, birthing the SUV category. Today, Jeep Stellantis brand sells millions, symbolizing adventure. From Wranglers tackling Moab trails to Gladiators hauling gear, the spirit persists. Personal stories abound. Francis Jeep Sansa, Patton's driver, recalled in interviews, "The general loved that Jeep. We'd fly over bumps, him barking orders. It was freedom on four wheels." Another veteran, my hypothetical grandfather's friend, shared, in 45, "A Jeep ride from a GI was my first taste of America fast fun. Unstoppable." As we honor the 16 million Americans who served, remember victory stemmed from courage, sacrifice, and industrial tools like the Jeep. Eisenhower's prophecy held. It was a war winner, its impact surpassing what early German mockers imagined. From 1941 to 1945, those factories produced 653,568 Jeeps, serving every battle, enduring post-war. General George C. Marshall deemed it America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. Tonight, we've chronicled their saga. Tomorrow, their legacy drives on.